You've already heard the short version. In 1964, a teenager tried to live without sleep. 11 days, no drugs, no stimulants, just science watching closely. But the short version leaves something out, because staying awake wasn't the scariest part. The real damage didn't show up until much later, and most people never hear about it. This is the full story of the man who lived without sleep. To understand why this experiment was so dangerous, you have to look at the world in 1964. Today, we know sleep is essential. If you don't sleep, you don't function. But back then, sleep science was practically a ghost town. Doctors knew people felt terrible without sleep, but no one knew the limits. Would the brain fail first? Would the heart stop? Could someone actually die just by staying awake? There were rumors, stories of soldiers breaking down after days without rest, prisoners losing their grip on reality. But no one had tested it under observation. And strangely, the person who decided to find out wasn't a scientist. He wasn't military. He wasn't funded by the government. He was a 17-year-old high school student named Randy Gardner. Randy wasn't sick, he wasn't reckless, and this wasn't a dare. He just wanted to win the San Diego Science Fair. Randy and two classmates, Bruce McAllister and Joe Marciano, came up with what sounded like a simple project. What happens if a human doesn't sleep? At the time, there was no ethics board to shut it down. No adults stepped in, so they flipped a coin to choose who would stay awake. Randy lost. And once the experiment began, there was no easy way to stop. The rules were strict. No caffeine, no pills, no stimulants of any kind. If Randy felt tired, he had to stand. If he drifted, his friends talked to him or made him move. Doctors monitored him constantly. His memory, coordination, and brain waves. And at first, everything looked fine, which turned out to be the most dangerous sign of all. Day one passed quietly. Randy was energetic, excited, confident. The first 48 hours were uncomfortable but manageable. He laughed. He played pinball to stay alert. He joked with the researchers, but by day 3, the cracks began to show. He became irritable. His attention wandered. His reactions slowed. Then something more troubling appeared. Randy's short-term memory began to fail. He forgot conversations from minutes earlier. He started sentences and forgot how they ended. Still, his vital signs were normal. So the experiment continued. By day 4, this stopped feeling like a science fair project. Randy struggled with basic math. Simple counting confused him. And during neurological tests, doctors noticed something chilling. Parts of his brain were briefly shutting down while he was still awake. This is called microsleep. His eyes were open. He looked conscious. But entire sections of his brain were asleep for seconds at a time. He was sleeping with his eyes open, and he didn't even know it. To understand why the researchers were terrified, you need to know what happened the last time someone tried this. Just a few years earlier, a radio DJ named Peter Tripp stayed awake for 200 hours in Times Square. It ended badly. By day 3, Tripp became aggressive. By day 5, he hallucinated spiders crawling inside his shoes. By the end, he believed doctors were undertakers trying to bury him alive. His personality reportedly never recovered. He lost his job. His marriage collapsed. He was never the same. So when Randy Gardner reached day 6, everyone watching held their breath. They were waiting for him to snap. And then, the hallucinations began. Randy started seeing shapes that weren't there. He mistook objects for people. At one point, he stared at a street sign, convinced it was a man watching him. But the most disturbing moment came in the bathroom. Randy looked in the mirror and didn't see himself. He saw a famous football player named Paul Lowe. He was completely convinced he was someone else. That moment scared the doctors more than anything else they had seen. His identity was dissolving. He accused researchers of plotting against him. He became paranoid. And yet, his body refused to fail. His heart rate was normal. His temperature stable. His blood pressure barely changed. His body was surviving, but his mind was unraveling. What was happening inside Randy's brain at this point terrified the doctors watching him. Because sleep deprivation doesn't damage the brain all at once. It dismantles it in layers. By day 6, Randy's brain had entered a survival state. Instead of shutting down completely, it began rationing consciousness. Parts of his brain were essentially going offline to protect themselves. Memory first, then emotional control, then identity. This is why the hallucinations felt so real. His brain wasn't imagining things the way a dream does. It was misfiring reality. Visual information stopped lining up correctly. Sounds lost their meaning. Objects were stripped of context. A street sign wasn't just metal and paint anymore. His brain tried to fill in the gaps, and sometimes it filled them with people. Worse still, the part of the brain responsible for judgment was shutting down. Randy couldn't tell that something was wrong. This is why sleep deprivation is used as a torture method, not because it hurts immediately, but because it quietly removes your ability to understand what's happening to you. By this point, doctors noticed something chilling. Even when Randy seemed awake, large portions of his brain activity resembled deep sleep. He wasn't fully conscious anymore. He was drifting in and out of reality without realizing it. And here's the part that scared them most. The brain doesn't warn you when it's about to break. There's no pain signal, no alarm. You don't feel yourself slipping. You just do. Which meant Randy could have continued talking, walking, smiling, while his mind quietly collapsed underneath him. That's when the researchers realized something uncomfortable. They weren't observing an experiment anymore. They were racing against a limit no one had ever reached before. By day 7, Randy's speech slurred so badly he sounded drunk. Doctors asked him to walk in a straight line. He couldn't. He staggered like someone who'd emptied a bottle of whiskey without touching a drop. By day 10, Randy was barely coherent. He could talk, but his thoughts were fragmented. And then the most dangerous symptom appeared. Randy no longer realized how impaired he was. This condition is called anosognosia, when the brain loses awareness of its own damage. In other words, he didn't know he was breaking down. He thought he was fine. On day 11, after 264 hours awake, the experiment ended. Not because his body failed, but because doctors feared his mind might never recover if they continued. They let Randy sleep. No medication, no sedation, just rest. He was taken to a naval hospital, electrodes attached to his head as doctors watched his brain reboot. Randy slept for 14 hours and 40 minutes straight. When he woke up, everyone waited. They expected psychosis. They expected personality changes. But Randy just woke up. He was groggy, hungry. He recognized everyone. Tests showed no immediate brain damage. On paper, the experiment was declared a success. But that wasn't the end of the story. Years later, Randy Gardner admitted something unsettling. His sleep never fully returned to normal. For decades, he struggled with chronic insomnia. He described it as karmic payback. He had taken 11 days from his body, and his body spent the next 50 years quietly taking them back. Doctors couldn't prove permanent damage, but they couldn't rule it out either. The experiment lasted 11 days. The consequences followed him for life. Because of Randy Gardner, this experiment has never been officially repeated. Guinness World Records removed the category entirely. They determined encouraging people to beat the record carried unacceptable risks. Today, we understand why. Sleep isn't passive. It isn't just rest. It's when the brain clears toxic waste, regulates emotion, stabilizes reality itself. Without sleep, the brain doesn't just get tired, it becomes dangerous. Randy Gardner survived. But the experiment answered a terrifying question. Sleep doesn't just protect the body, it protects who you are. Take it away long enough, and reality starts to unravel. So here's the real question. How long could you stay awake? before you stopped being you. If true stories like this feel unreal to you, you're in the right place. Subscribe. The next one is even stranger.